And let's say you're able to show up and have a conversation with that younger Jeff. And you're able to give that younger Jeff one piece of advice before launching a business. What would that be and why, given what you know now?
Buy Amazon stock.
I love it. I love it. Alrighty, hello everyone and welcome to the Deal Maker Show. So today we have an amazing guest. We have a guest that I've been a fan for quite some time now. And we're talking about a founder turned investor. He's also written some really exciting books. The latest one, we're going to be talking about it today as well. And again, brace yourself for a really incredible conversation about, everything that you can think of, whether it's building, scaling, financing, exiting. He's done it all. He's also doing it right now from the other side of the table. And without further ado, let's welcome our guest today, Jeff Bussgang. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alejandro. Great to see you.
So originally born in the Boston area in 1969. So give us a walk through memory lane. How was life growing up for you?
Yeah, I was actually born in Cambridge, just across the river from Harvard University. And my dad was a tech entrepreneur who had survived the Holocaust and came to Boston to go to MIT and then earned his PhD at Harvard. While he was at MIT, he came up with a theorem called the Bussgang theorem, which is a well-known theorem in the world of applied math and physics. And so I very much had a technical kitchen table MBA with a tech entrepreneur dad back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Taught myself how to program back in the PC era, fell in love with the Apple II, II Plus, Pet Commodore, the whole thing, and went to Harvard and studied computer science at Harvard. Alejandro, I sort of blush when I say this, but in 1987, as a freshman, I came to Harvard to major in computer science and AI in particular. So NLP, neural networks, et cetera. It's sort of a funny thing to think about the arc of these things that 4 decades later, I'm still working on and investing in AI.
I mean, AI nowadays, the consciousness is absolutely crazy compared to back then. So I guess what caught your eye around AI back then?
Well, I fell in love with the idea of natural language processing and the ability to communicate with AI, pass the Turing test, parse grammar, language, read. I took graduate courses in NLP and computer vision to read and recognize images. I just thought the whole area was fascinating.
So obviously problem solving sounds like it was exciting to you, being an engineer, right? Now, one of the things that to further shape that, you went to New York and you went to the Boston Consulting Group. And what I like about the consulting world is that it allows you in firms like BCG to be able to grab one big problem and kind of like break it down into small problems so that then you can tackle them. Also, how do you think, let's say, the experience of being in the consulting world, help you with the way that you approach problems as well?
I think you said it beautifully. Analytical thinking, problem solving, strategic thinking, value pools and value creation. And of course, I became very skilled at PowerPoint, which is an important skill, communicating at a very young age and synthesizing complex issues and problems at a very young age.
So business school, obviously it had to be Harvard, which has been, in your heart since the beginning in your career. I guess, what do you think pushed you towards, shifting gears and going back to business school?
I wanted to be a tech entrepreneur like my dad. And simply put, I thought an MBA would be beneficial. And I was very lucky in 1993 when I arrived, 1994, I saw the Mosaic browser and completely fell in love with the idea of the internet as a potential business environment. Wrote what was one of the first articles in Harvard Business Review on that topic and joined a seed stage internet startup in 1995 when I graduated in the spring of 95.
Now, back then, probably you had a bunch of classmates that were starting their own companies. I mean, you knew you wanted to be a tech entrepreneur too. So why did you join, another team versus going out of your own?
Well, first I'll say no one was starting a company back then. Absolutely no one. I was one of only a handful that went into an internet startup. And I just loved the idea of the company, Open Market, which was backed by Greylock, had raised a couple $1 million, had a small team, and had this vision, a very ambitious vision at the time in 1995, of turning the internet into a commercial environment and providing the tools and the platforms and the infrastructure to enable that.
And how was that journey like? Because you guys took the company public, there was the unicorn valuation. I mean, that's quite the experience for being the first rodeo.
Yeah, it was a rocket ship going public in 1996, at a time when not a lot of internet companies were going public at billion-dollar valuations. It was like 20 years before Aileen Lee coined the term unicorn, we were a unicorn. And we really just had a terrific rocket ship ride. And I had the opportunity and privilege of learning how to split scale and in the language of today and build a valuable company in a very rapid time frame. We had a sign outside of our office window facing the highway in Kendall Square. Can you code? Question mark. Visit openmarket.com. We hired a few hundred people in the first year or two, scaled very rapidly, built a lot of products, and I had the privilege of ending up on the executive team well before I was ready, and just had an amazing ride.
And also the privilege of being exposed to complex situations, like, for example, a tense, let's say communication or situation between the CEO and the founder. What happened there?
Yeah, it's a classic pattern that we see time and time again in the startup ecosystem. When after we'd gone public, we had hired just before we went public, we hired a professional CEO who's an amazing leader, and the founder stepped aside and became board chair. And the professional CEO took us public, built a professional management team, changed over the team. I was the one remaining sort of holdover from the founders era to the executive, professional executive era. And, fights about or disagreements about strategic direction ensued, some fights ensued, and the two decided that the other should be no longer around, and only one of them, there was only room for one of them. And so the board had to make a decision, and those are very difficult decisions for boards to make, and boards don't have all the information, and they asked a couple of us on the executive team our opinion, and sort of have that dramatic boardroom where you're sitting in the waiting room, the board invites you in, you walk in, there's a panel of board members. In my case, I'm still in my 20s, everybody's very senior, there's billions of dollars at stake. And we just had very difficult conversations and made difficult decisions. I ended up sticking with the professional CEO who did a fantastic job. I'm still friends with both parties, and and it ended up being a great outcome for the company. We ended up at the time that I left in late 1999, early 2000 at a 2.5 billion market cap, and the company was really an important player in the Internet 1.0 infrastructure days.
So let's talk about that moment where you leave, because you left to now take the reins of your own future and to really, become an entrepreneur and start your own business. So you promise. So how does the whole idea of you promise come knocking to you?
So the founder of General Catalyst, David Fialco, had just started General Catalyst and reached out to me and connected me with a guy named Michael Bronner, who had been a marketer, had started a firm called Bronner Schlossberg, which had then turned into Digitas, gone public, been very successful in the marketing world. And Fialco had this vision, along with Michael Bronner, of creating a loyalty program and combining loyalty marketing, Michael's expertise, with the internet and internet commerce, my expertise. And so he introduced the two of us. We fell in love professionally, and developed this company together, and had just a great run building what ended up being a financial services back end behind a loyalty front end to help families save money for college, like a frequent flyer program through their everyday spending. And that money would go into a tax-free 529 account, which had just been created by the Bush administration.
So obviously there you also survived the dot-com crash, which was quite a big, fight there, to
Yeah.
take on. I guess what did you learn too from cycles? Because there's probably a bunch of people on the line that maybe they haven't experienced, what it looks like to be part of the boom and then the crash. In this case, you've not only experienced that, but you've also experienced different cycles as well. So what was your big takeaway, and what are your thoughts around financing cycles or life cycles, out there on the market and the
Yeah,
economics?
and just to give a little context, we raised our first round of financing at UPromise. We raised $34 million, and at a 114 million post-money valuation. So it was an extraordinary first round for a handful of founding team members and 20 very good PowerPoint slides. But we didn't have anything. We were pre-revenue, pre-product, pre-partners. And that round closed in March of 2000. The market crashed. And in late 2000, I was faced with a very difficult decision of trying to raise more capital to fuel our hyper growth or to hunker down. And we decided to go for it, and we ended up in a very difficult financing, raising $55 million in a strong follow-on financing, and then using that capital, the $90 million roughly total, to really hunker down and build what ended up being a quite valuable business that Sallie Mae eventually acquired for $300 million. But we went through some tough times. We had a bunch of layoffs. We had to reconfigure the strategy. We brought in new team members, including a new CEO. My co-founder had stepped aside, and we brought in an outside CEO that caused additional changes, cultural changes. And I guess what I would say is that staying true to the mission is really what got uPromise through that difficult period. And the mission, in our case, of helping families save money for college and helping our brands be more efficient and effective in their marketing, and just keeping everyone really focused on the mission through the ups and downs, and making the very important point that there are things externally we can't control. We can't control the external market. We can't control the fundraising market. But there are things we can control, and let's be excellent at what we can control. Let's build an excellent product. Let's solve an important problem that people care about, and that a good business will ensue.
So then in this case too, how was that moment like when you were alluding to it, when the company got acquired and those papers were inked? I mean, how did that feel for you? Because I mean, first company that you start, first outcome like that, I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Well, I had left just before to start Flybridge. And the story of starting Flybridge is that both uPromise and Open Market were backed by Greylock, among other firms like General Catalyst. And one of the Greylock partners, who at the time was a friend of mine, Chip Hazard, had left Greylock and spun out as Greylock was shifting their locus of their activities west. Historically, a Boston firm was transitioning to become a West Coast firm. And Chip invited me to start Flybridge with him. And then we also brought on board another Greylock partner from Boston named David Aronoff. And so the opportunity to start a venture fund and have another swing at a story at a time when uPromise was in a good position, and as you said, was acquired and it was a good acquisition, was a pretty special opportunity. And for many people out there who think about starting their own funds and trying to pursue their own journeys, those are really important inflection points where you have to decide who you want to work with, who do you want your partners to be, and what strategy do you want to have. 23 years later, Chip and I are still the partners at the firm, side by side, working on this. David has retired from the firm. He's partner emeritus, but he's still a partner in the old funds. That's a pretty long journey together. And there aren't a lot of venture funds that have two founding partners who have been together side by side working for 23 years. So maybe we'll talk about that. But having that crucible moment of deciding what do you want to do and who do you want to do it with was really what hit me back then.
And why really going to the other side of the table, versus, keep going at the building and scaling? I mean, obviously here you built, another firm, another company, but in this case, on the other side of the table. So why shifting gears here in terms of where you were sitting at the table?
So having gone through a couple cycles with two companies over some pretty amazing ups and downs, acquisitions, M&A, IPO, different economic cycles, I just felt like maybe I had something to give to entrepreneurs, to coach them along the way and help them avoid all the mistakes that I had made as a founder. And also having the opportunity to do it with somebody who I really respected tremendously in Chip and later in David, who were close friends and folks who I thought maybe this could be my last job. Maybe I could, even at the young age of, at the time I was 32 or 33, I can't remember which, but at the time I was in my early 30s, and I could look back on what has now been 2+ decades and say, we've really created something of value that's enduring.
Now, for you guys, it's been quite the run. 300 companies that you have invested in, $1 billion across 7 seed funds, 2 opportunity funds, and really amazing companies that you've been able to back, such as MongoDB. For those listening, we have also had Kevin Ryan, Elliot, the co-founders there, FalconX, and BitSight. I guess let's take those 3 for example, right? Which were some of the highlights, of the journey here. Obviously, many highlights, but I guess if we had to surface 3 that the listeners, could identify, could be those. What would you say were the ingredients that those three shared when it comes to, let's say, a lot of people talk about pattern recognition when it comes to being on the investment side? What do you think those three companies had in common?
Well, it's a little trite to say this, but team and market are the two most important things in the success of a venture. And you can see that through line across all three. It also takes a little bit of luck, maybe a lot of luck. And as investors, we have the privilege of being alongside entrepreneurs who collectively, maybe we get a bit lucky. MongoDB, one example of that. That was an incredible team that spun out of DoubleClick. DoubleClick was a Greylock-backed company in the advertising space, one of the OG internet companies in the New York tech scene, had been successful, gone public, was acquired by Google, learned how to build an enduring, valuable company, learned what excellence looked like, and endeavored to pursue that in this very dynamic database market. We at the time thought the database market would be maybe an $8 billion market, and taking on Oracle and IBM at the time, never mind Microsoft, seemed a bit crazy, but we thought there was a chance of a platform shift into this whole NoSQL world with the internet application era and the cloud era, that maybe a great technical team could hit that market window. And they really hit it beautifully. Now it took some, twists and turns. But we had three CEOs over the life of the company, and as you noted, the company went public and is now worth somewhere between 15 and $20 billion, and is one of the most important anchor pillars of the New York tech scene in today's era, and proved for the first time in a long time the critics that you could build a real tech company in New York, a native New York enterprise software company. But the thing that I would observe about MongoDB was the product was great, like really great, open source, download, immediate and obvious benefit right away for the developer. It had a developer driven adoption model, so bottoms up instead of top down. Nobody was calling the head of Goldman Sachs IT. Instead, individual developers would be downloading it, putting it into their applications. And you fast forward a year or two, and Goldman Sachs is calling MongoDB and saying, "Hey, I've got your application running in my environment in 20 or 30 places. I need to have a relationship with you all." And then finally, the market tailwinds were incredible. What we thought was an $8 billion market turned out to be a 40 or $50 billion market as data exploded. So it sort of combined a lot of elements with tailwinds, very good execution, a very good technical product, and a really quite novel at the time distribution strategy, what we would now call product led growth or PLG.
Now, I have to mention this. I love the books that you've written, which I think that also touch on many of these ups and downs too that you've experienced in your journey. The first one, which actually came out in 2011, Mastering the VC Game. I mean, I mentioned to this offline, but I bought that one in hardcover and then also in audio. It was so good, and it really taught me the ins and outs of the whole dynamics with between venture capital and founders. And I'm wondering, like, I guess for the people that are right now listening, what do you think could be their biggest takeaway if they were to read that book right now?
The one word I would summarize with that book is alignment. That as an entrepreneur, and from the lens of an entrepreneur, which is what I wrote the book focused on, seeking VCs that are aligned with you and running the process that you're running, the fundraising process, like a sales process. You have to be very strategic. You have to have a pipeline. You have to have a value proposition. You have to have compelling reasons to continue along each stage in the process, but to ensure alignment throughout the entire way, because you can get somebody on the cap table, but you can't get them off the cap table. And so really ensuring alignment throughout the entire end-to-end process is really the essence of mastering the VC game.
And what about entering startup land? What can they take out of it?
So entering startup land, the insight there was that joiners have a place in the startup ecosystem, that founders are the magicians that everybody puts on the pedestal, but behind every single or two or three founders, there's employee number 4 to 400, the joiners that help build the company and create the enduring value. And so I wanted to create a book that allowed joiners, people who really aspired to get into the startup ecosystem but may not have the brilliant idea or may not self-identify as a founder, to give them a roadmap on how to get in and what to do once they got in. I was trying to answer the questions that many of my students at Harvard, and we'll get to my maybe last 15 years of teaching in Harvard Business School, but many of my students would come to me and say, how do I break into this startup ecosystem? I have general skills, but I don't really know how to navigate it. And I really wanted to answer that question. with entering startup land.
Well, without a doubt, I mean, you've been teaching there at HBS, for quite a while, and one of the things that I want to talk about real quick here is the latest book that you published, and this book is so timely. Literally, you published it in 2024. Is when it came out. Sorry, it came out in 2025, but really, the whole idea and putting this to work, came out. I think it was like 2024 was when you literally wrote this thing. Now, one thing that is incredible, I mean, it's called the experimentation machine. And it's basically finding product market fit in the age of AI. And it is just incredible because now AI has literally exploded. And one thing that really comes to mind here, especially you being, we were talking about pattern recognition and, great companies like MongoDB, FalconX, BitSight. I guess now in this world of AI, how do you think things are shifting to when it comes, for example, to let's say, the habits and behaviors of being a 10x founder and how you use, let's say, AI to your advantage?
Yeah. So first, thanks for the shout out to the book. I've got it here. And
I got it too.
thank you. I appreciate you gassing it up. And yeah, what the insight from the book, and I wrote the book, as you note, over the course of 2024, as I was, Flybridge is a AI focused seed stage venture capital fund investing out of our two offices in New York and Boston. And I also teach entrepreneurship and technology ventures at Harvard, as you mentioned, and at HBS, I was working with all these students who are AI first founders. So I'm seeing these two populations leveraging these modern AI tools to accelerate their work. And I just came up with this idea of the book and with the idea of the 10x founder, the founder that's leveraging timeless techniques, customer discovery and experimentation and building MVPs and developing earned secrets and insights and executing on novel go-to-market techniques with these timely AI tools and doing so to be that much better, not just 10% better, 20% better, but like the mythical 10x developer being 10x better than the average founder. And I sort of begin the book with this idea that I don't know if AI is going to replace founders anytime soon, but founders who use AI are absolutely going to replace founders who don't use AI. And making sure that all the founders out there are leveraging these modern tools in their work. That's really the essence of the message of the book.
And what about competitive moats too? In this new era of AI.
It's really the question, Alejandro, that all of us as investors and that all the founders out there are thinking about, which is, hey, if software development costs are plummeting and if it's so easy to rapidly build application software, where's the moat? If I build something, my competitor can fast follow and copy me. And it's a question that the big software franchises are asking themselves. You look at the big application software franchises like Salesforce and Adobe and Workday, they're all paranoid about this question. And we're all investing, the entire venture capital system, Flybridge and others are all investing in startups that are going after those franchises and going after these opportunities. And so I would say, let me make a macro observation and then I'll make three micro points. The macro observation is I don't know if there is a competitive mode anymore. It might be the case that there is no big one single competitive mode, that instead this is about execution and speed. And maybe, as somebody else has put this, there's a series of small competitive modes that you establish as you execute as a startup. And that builds brand and distribution and a system. And then the system is the competitive mode. But the three things that we look for, in addition to a founder who can understand and maybe show evidence of an ability to execute very rapidly and build that system, we look for proprietary data sets, the ability to establish some proprietary data so that the general purpose models aren't doing exactly what you can do. This problem of ChatGPT killed my startup every time there's a new release of OpenAI's platform. So competitive moat. Second is around the insight that you really want to build a system of record, a platform that, if you're in the enterprise software world, that people are using all day, every day. So we have a portfolio company called Allspice, which is focused on it's the GitHub for hardware engineers. It's helping hardware engineers do designs, and it's this great cloud-based collaboration platform. And those engineers are in the Allspice environment, engineers from places like Meta and Waymo and um, satellite companies. They're using this platform, like Blue Origin. They're using this platform all day, every day to design their products. So that's a really important thing, to become a system of record. Uh, and third, having an insight into the human AI interface. There's something really special about ChatGPT and all the chatbots when they came out. These AI capabilities existed before. GPT 1.0, GPT 2.0, GPT 3.0, GPT 3.5 comes out, and they throw the chatbot interface on top just as a throwaway, as an experiment, and the thing takes off because they nailed the human AI interface. They manifested all these incredible AI capabilities in a way that was accessible to humans. And so looking for those really powerful human AI interfaces, and I'll give you one example on that. We have a portfolio company, Topline Pro, which helps service pros with their sales, marketing, and customer service. Service pros like electricians and plumbers and roofers and landscapers. And when somebody's on the roof fixing a shingle, they don't have time to be on their desktop building a website or communicating with customers. They're on the roof. And so they needed agentic AI capabilities to help them with website building and marketing and sales and customer service. But these are roofers and landscapers. They're not tech experts. They're not going to build AI agents. And so Topline Pro had to build this really incredible interface to make that powerful agentic AI capability accessible to the service pros in a very seamless way. And that's what they've done. And they've now grown to thousands and thousands of customers and an incredible platform. So it's those types of things, Alejandro, that we're looking for when we look for companies that we can invest in.
Now, in your book, you also talk about startup valuation. And obviously, it's more like an appendix, what you have in there, but it's quite a science, as you put it. How should founders think about valuation? How to approach that, really?
The first thing I say is develop the milestones that you think represent a valuation inflection point. So you are wherever you are today. After the next 12, 18, 24 months, what are the 3 or 4 milestones that if you achieve them, you will hit that magical valuation inflection point and can double or triple your valuation? And then think about how much capital you need to get to those milestones and give yourself a little bit of a cushion. That's the amount of capital you should probably raise in this round, whether it's the pre-seed or seed round. And then apply the rule of 20 that I like to encourage founders to think about, which is sell only about 20% of your company. You're going to have 3, 4, 5 rounds between now and the end zone. And even in the modern AI age where you can build companies with less, maybe you can stretch out that seed round further, but you'll probably have 3 or 4 rounds. You shouldn't sell more than 20%. So if it takes you 18 months to hit those important milestones and $2 or $3 million, rule of 20 says 10 or 15 million post-money valuation is sort of the benchmark. And then think about what's market. What are other people raising money at that have the similar components in terms of quality of team, whether they're repeat founders or first-time founders, quality of market, how big's the market size, quality of the progress, the momentum, and then build from there. So we see pre-seed rounds, 10, 15 million post, often $2 to $3 million rounds. Seed rounds, maybe 4, 5, $6 million being raised at 30, 40 post. And then Series A rounds, 10 to $20 million, 60, 80, or 100 million post, all sort of following this pattern.
Well, for those of you listening, you heard it right there. Go get your copy, the experimentation machine. So do it right now. Now, I guess one question that comes to mind too is there's quite a shift happening in venture capital. People are talking about it as wave 3 of some sorts, now where private equity, entrepreneurship, and venture capital all coming together as one. What are your thoughts on this, Jeff? I mean, you've seen a lot. Where are things heading?
Well, there are 2 observations that's happening at the same time. On the one hand, it's never been easier and cheaper to start a company and get traction. And so many entrepreneurs are seed strapping. They raise the seed round, maybe the $2 to $3 million round, as I said, maybe a $4 million mango seed. And then they're stretching that further and further because you don't need to hire 10 to 15 employees in your race to the $1 million ARR magic threshold. You can do it with 2 or 3 employees and tens of or hundreds of AI agents, as I talk about in the book. So the early stage players like ourselves are having to fight to win our spot in those early stage companies because there are fewer and fewer windows because of this seed strapping phenomenon. And then to build enduring, really big companies that have a chance to go public, that have global distribution and a powerful brand, you still need hundreds of millions of dollars, in some cases, billions of dollars. And so you're seeing these mega rounds being raised by the Perplexities of the world and the Anthropics of the world as they build franchises, as they build what they hope will be tens of billions of dollars, if not hundreds of billions of dollars of value. And you need really big funds to write those checks. And so the General Catalysts of the world and the A16Zs and the Lightspeeds are raising larger and larger funds to write those mega checks. And that's this bifurcation in the market. You've got more and more competition at the seed stage for a smaller pool of cap table room. And then you've got a lot of competition for those few mega winners that are the obvious winners that are just trying to get to the pre-IPO and IPO rounds accordingly.
That's incredible. Now, let's say I put you into a time machine, Jeff, and I bring you back in time to that moment where you were coming out of getting your degree in Harvard Business School. And let's say you have, now obviously at that point you were going to go to, obviously your first startup, as an employee, but it's still, you were entrepreneurial back then. We're joining something that still was, being created. But let's just say you had the opportunity of being able to have a sit down with your younger self, that just, threw the cap app and was celebrating the graduation and all of that and thinking about what's next. And let's say you're able to show up and have a conversation with that younger Jeff. And you're able to give that younger Jeff one piece of advice before launching a business. What would that be and why, given what you know now of being involved in 2 successful startups, in investing in 300 startups? You have only one shot, one piece of advice. What would you say to that younger Jeff?
Buy Amazon stock.
I love it.
No, the real advice I would give is choose your partners wisely. And that goes for co-founders, investor partners, even life partners. I've been married 31 years. I've had a partnership with Chip Hazard, my co-founder at Flybridge, for 22, 23 years. And you just got to be really thoughtful, because if you build enduring partnerships in life and in business, then all else kind of falls into place.
So obviously, partnerships in love is tough to give advice, but let's say partnerships in business, given what you've seen, what should be the 3 key ingredients that, let's say, folks that are listening right now that are looking at maybe, for a co-founder or something along those lines, what should be the 3 key things that they should be looking for?
The first I would say is trust. You're investing each other's money. Your fate and success and ups and downs are dependent on each other's decisions. Sometimes those quiet decisions when you have that crucible moment. Sometimes it's the things that you do when no one's looking, the small decisions that you make, the deals that you decide to pursue, the emails you decide to respond to, the meetings you decide to take. And so having a really high degree of trust that the individual that you're partnering with has your interests and the team's interests at heart, I think is really critical. So that's sort of a trust and character point. The second is competence. So in addition to character and trust, you want to make sure you're dealing with somebody who's competent, who's really world-class at what they do. And I'm very blessed in working with Chip on both fronts. And the third is fun. Like, you put a lot of time into this. You've got to have fun along the way. If you're not having fun, it's really just not going to feel worth it to get on that red eye and to get up at 6 a.m. and to work on that weekend, deck or project or whatever. So character/trust, competence, and fun would be the things I would focus on.
I love it. Jeff, for the people that are listening that would love to reach out and say hi, what is the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. It's probably the best thing. You can just message me or shoot me an email, jeff@flybridge.com.
Amazing. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for being on the Dealmaker Show today. It has been an absolute honor to have you with us.
Thanks, Alejandro. Really great to see you.